just the arts and the music and literature and things like that. But culture is everything. We can start talking about culture by talking about social structures. A culture exists, a society exists almost completely to facilitate infants becoming functional adults. That's what it's about. Now, if our kids grew up in a few weeks like goslings, maybe it'd be a little different. But I don't know if any of you have seen that video of the gosling who's getting out of his nest and he goes falling down the hill, the cliffside for hundreds of feet. We don't do that. We give our kids 11, 12, 15, anymore, 23, 25 years to start functioning as adults. And that's what the social systems are in place to do. They're to create something that allows the children to grow up. In order to support the systems, we create a bunch of tools and technologies. There are all the ways that we work with the world around us. They're the houses we build, they're the bowls and spoons and fires and vehicles and everything that we use. Technology is every single kind of tool that we use. Looms, cameras, everything. And it's the way we use them. And technology is one of the things that causes change in social systems most quickly. And if you want to understand how that is, how many of you read the instructions before you start to do something new? Yep. We're all the time changing our techniques and methods. We're all figuring out how we're going to do it. And most of the time, we're coming up with a new tool while we're at it. So technology, on the one hand, it's the most immediate way that we maintain social systems. And on the other hand, it's one of the quickest ways to change one. Within the social systems, we use the technologies and we are producing and distributing goods and services. Goods ranging from the food that we're growing and eating, to the clothing we're wearing, to houses and parts of houses, to all the other tools that we use for everything. So the economic system is the system by which we produce and distribute our goods and services. It is not necessarily a cash-based system. And that's something that we need to talk about if we're going to talk about a different kind of world. There's a wonderful book by a guy named Bernie Lyotard called The Future of Money. And it's actually the history of money and suggests some options for the future. He's from Brussels, he's Belgian, and he was one of the people putting together the European network that supports our Visa cards and MasterCards. And he was involved in creating the euro. He took a sabbatical and he came to the States because he realized that there was something around consciousness and money. And he went to work for IONS. Not really. He went to sit down with Willis Harman when Willis was president of IONS and said, I want to do some work in this area and I'd like to stay here. And Willis said, well, I've got this friend in Berkeley. She's a Jungian therapist. You can stay in her house and write your book. Well, put an economist from overseas, a banker from overseas, in Berkeley, in a house filled with books of Jungian archetypes and myths and goddess literature and history and archaeology. And he went a little bonkers. And I'm so glad he did. Because what he came to understand and pointed out so clearly is that money is an outgrowth of the institutionalization of religion and government. The first money that was ever invented was in the temples, and we can go on and deal with that in a later class, later group if you want to. But he became aware that a cash exchange-based economy is the least efficient way to produce and distribute goods and services. Well, that was almost 20 years ago. Since then, we've invented an even less efficient way. It's called the debt-based economy. The debt-based economy, based on I'll borrow enough money to get something done here, and then you can borrow enough money to buy it. The only people who are winning in that scenario are the banks. We've slowed our production way down. We've raised the cost of distribution incredibly, and we've become incredibly inefficient as a culture. Our social structures are failing because our economic system is so inefficient. So that's part of it. The next part of culture is the environment in which the culture is happening. Social systems tend to be designed to fit their natural environment. We're not going to do a hunting-gathering culture in this world today, and where any of the areas that we live in. A hunting-gathering culture requires habitat for wildlife. We've managed to wipe out most of those habitats in most of the places that Western culture is occupying today. A horticultural society, social structure, generally is located on a river valley and generally has a fair amount of arable land, as well as forests and other wildlife habitats. It's a mixture of everything. So the system, the structure, the social structure, is going to be related to the natural environment. And of course, the natural environment is going to determine what resources can be used to produce goods and services and to create tools to do all of that. So there's a lot of interaction between these four qualities or characteristics or aspects of culture. Every one of them can change everything. And then we have the process by which we make decisions. This is part of the culture too. If you recall the movie Dancing with Wolves, remember how they made the decision whether to include him in the group or not? All the men sat in a tent and listened to each other. And they listened to each other until everyone there had been heard. And when everyone had been heard, someone summarized what they had heard. And when everyone agreed that that's what they had said, then the decision was made. That's possible in a small group. Our Congress, as I last checked, I think has 645 members. How are we all going to be heard? So how the collective decisions are made and how actions are taken is very much a function of the nature of the social system. And obviously it's going to affect every other aspect of the culture. If we're going to talk about where we're headed, we have to include that. Every one of these contributes to and is a function of the values that we bring. Now, values for me is a shorthand for all kinds of things. It's all of our assumptions, all of our expectations, all of our beliefs, all the attitudes, and all the behaviors that grow out of all of that. So I'm not just talking about what we say when we're in a religious environment, what we say when we're trying to teach our kids or our grandkids. I'm talking about what we actually believe about who we are and how the world works. In one way, we can say that this component would be the equivalent of what IONS is looking at, the consciousness of the person we're talking about, or the group. Now, how many of you are familiar with the Global Consciousness Project? Raise your hands, please. Oh my goodness. You need to watch the, further down the rabbit hole, the follow-up to What the Bleep Do We Know? And you need to see some of the results in there where Dean Radin, who's the director of research for IONS, talks about some of the studies they're doing. You also need to see a video called Something We don't know what is, no, something that we can't see is doing, we don't know what. There we go. And it's a video that talks a lot about IONS research. And both of them give the details on the consciousness project, the Global Consciousness Project. This is something that is a bunch of personal computers all around the planet. They all have random number generators going, so they all should be randomly generating numbers, you know, without any pattern to them, just a number here, a number there, a number here, a number there. But it turns out that computers are affected by the people around them. Now, people have been operating computers. I've grown up in the computer world, so I've seen this my whole life. People who operate computers know that if they sit in front of the computer screen or look at a computer output and start focusing on anything, they can change a random number generator. They can cause randomness to decrease. They can actually, after a while, some people have been able to generate new patterns in what that random generator is turning out. Just in case you didn't think that mine had any effect on matter. So in the Global Consciousness Project, they decided to hook up a bunch of these machines all over the world and see what happened when a lot of people were focusing on something. They got the money to do it after Princess Di's funeral. They were fully functioning on 9/11, 2001. There are graphs online. You can see them online. I've got them in one or two of my books. I didn't put one in here. I don't usually talk about it, but you're in IONS group, so I am. Their graphs show that there were squiggles on 2009. The random number generators were being affected by people's changing in consciousness. They're changing ideas about what's going on in the world. Their emotional states associated with that as early as the day before 2011, 2009, 2010. And in 2011, that thing spiked so far that they had to put in different kinds of paper, different kinds of scales on their machines, because it was so far from random as more and more people woke up to what happened in Manhattan at 9/11. IONS is about what it is that we think we are, who we think we are, and what we think the world is. And that sector, that aspect of the culture is a very, very important piece and can be seen as the driver, ultimately, of all the rest. But all the rest affects it. And that's an important thing to be aware of. So culture is all of the things I just said, the set of beliefs, the values and assumptions that we have about the world and our place in it. It's the social structures, the methods, the material things that we create, that we build, that we destroy and maintain as a result of that. And we have a lot of myths in our culture about how things are. We have this myth. We've been taught since birth that human beings have always lived by the rule of force and violence. Research in recent years is saying, nope, not so. We've been taught a man's victories have always been the most important things in life. Again, research says, nope, that's not what's been most important. Our myth, women have always, except in modern cities, been uninformed and powerless. There is no basis for that in any archaeological or anthropological research anywhere. The myth that war is inevitable. There is some evidence that for the last, well, we know for the last 6,000 years, wherever there's been an empire, there's been war. And there is some evidence that there are some cultures that are not very profoundly affected by our empire culture, where they do fight with other people. But almost every single tribe, any single tribe that has battles with other tribes, indigenous groups, indigenous nations, has been affected by Western empire culture. The reason we know that is because in an indigenous culture, who I am is defined by the land I live on. So why would I take anyone else's land? It's theirs. It's them. It's not who I am. So when Native Americans say this land is sacred, they're saying this land is who we are. So why would they ever fight anyone else over land?